I'll start over. Hi, everyone. This meeting is about the DAG pipeline graph. And we are here to talk about the context of how we're going through the engineering process. And so the idea was that we want to create a graph that will represent DAG-only pipelines. Originally, this issue was to represent a graph with stage pipelines and DAG pipeline together. But in our previous discussion, we kind of felt that that was a bit more complex, and generating something that worked for both at the same time would require way more effort and time. And so we decided to go with like an approach that's easier, which is DAG only, where we would take that DAG graph and put it in a separate tab. So we would have the normal stage view and then the DAG only view. And that made it much easier for us to engineer because there is less clutter in the graph. Because when you have stage and DAG, then you have lines that cross over between the normal cascading view of the stage view and to the DAG. And that was a bit more complex. So what we have so far in terms of DAG only is we've been playing around with D3, and we've injected the data, and we can build a graph with lines that connects all of the DAG job, basically. So far, it's scaling pretty well. There are still some issues about like some spacing or like even like understanding or cleaning a bit of the code, but that's kind of where we are so far. I can share my screen for a second, just for the record, and show kind of what it looks like currently. That thing that will help everyone kind of understand. So this is, whoops, sorry, kind of close it. Here we go. So this is kind of what it looks like. So you can see so far, like you can have like all of the DAG job connecting. It can go cross stage. So the idea was that for now, we still use the stage view as in like, because all of our DAG job needs to have a stage anyway, we're visually representing them in their original stage, but we're connecting all the lines throughout, no matter what the stage is. And it scales no matter how many jobs you have here or on the left to the right side. So that's kind of where we are in terms of visually and conceptually. So I'm gonna stop monologuing and start asking people to comment on if they have questions or any concern on like what it looks like or where we're at in terms of programming.
If other people have more specific questions, that's fine to go over that too. I'm a little curious just where you are technically and sort of what you guys have coming up, because I'm still new to this, but if everyone else already knows that and has other more specific questions, please chime in too.
I think that's relevant, and even like just to understand, I would say that right now, like we were both, like Piton and I, we're both new to D3. So I think like having your eyes on all of this would be super useful. And we're kind of looking forward to having you around and like helping us direct this. I think like in a purely technical discussion, I think what's interesting is I've realized that D3 is really just about bounding data to your graph. And there are some data preparation that we have to do to kind of draw the graph correctly. And it's the line between should we use D3 for that preparation or should we do that in JS and then pass that to D3? I think there's kind of a interesting separation of concern there that we're not sure yet how that's gonna look like. So I would say that's one pretty big concern we have. The other one is we're trying to leverage D3 as much as possible for like drawing lines, for example. So instead of having custom SVG and then passing around coordinates, trying to make sure that D3 can handle the spacing between elements, that it can handle like the size. So far, we're passing D3 coordinates for each line, and we're using the line function, so it draws the line for us. So that's good. But at some point, we also want to have a curve, for example, so that the lines are better looking, and so we will need to use D3 curve and like a factory. So there are kind of all of this like getting used to what D3 can power for us and what's more complicated to use D3 for than like just a plain JavaScript function.
I'd also like to make a note of, I'd say like one of the things that would be great that I don't know if it's even possible right now is every time I find myself writing vanilla JavaScript, I try to take a step back and look through the docs and be like, is there a D3-ish way we can do this? but like Fred was talking about, like the preparation of data is one of the things that I don't know if we can get around. Currently, we pretty much do that all by hand, because it looks like the design that was chosen isn't like a typical data structure. Like and even like DAG in general, I'm not familiar with like that type of data structure. Like if we can return something like that from the back end, maybe, I don't really know, for a DAG. But currently we're just manipulating the data, to come up with our own data structure that's going to allow us to track coordinates and make these joins, and then like also make it where it's going to be stable.
Right, that makes sense. So you were showing the version with like 3 stages right now. Have you guys been working on dumping like one thing in and 1,000 things in to see where it's where it's scaling now, or is that one of the next steps?
That's one of the next step for sure. Right now, it's like we're trying to with different kind of data, but not like very large set. I think exactly like you know better, but I think that D3 has a couple of very useful functions like scale linear, where you can make sure that everything's scaled properly, and then we'd have to explore kind of, do we want an overflow or do we want the SVG to scale? Is it like, my guess is that it's going to be something like an overflow, where like the div is like, if you have a very big SVG and you just scroll through it, I think that makes the most sense.
If it's helpful to you, we can set like a max for now, for this first iteration, and say like, well, if you got more than 1,000 nodes in the DAG, then we're not even going to try and render it. And then we can see who even asks for more than whatever is a basic reasonable amount to support. So if you find yourself like really optimizing for that last 10% or 20% or whatever, like feel free to bail on that in an iteration.
Cool. Thanks, that makes sense. Yeah, so the just also another clarification, the data preparation we're talking about is currently like what we are receiving in terms of data, is we have each job that has that we're only receiving like, you know, all the jobs, but we don't have like the needs keyword, for example. So we don't have that information, which that will be something that we're expecting from the backend, so that we can have an endpoint that gives us all of the jobs that are basically DAGs and what job do they require. And once we have that, then the other question is like, we need the opposite as well. So each job and it's dependent. So for example, if you have like the first job, and it has 7 dependency, then it means there are going to be 7 lines, and that impacts the scaling of the graph and how we position the jobs. So that's also one of the things that we're looking into. Like we're currently doing it, but we're manipulating the data ourselves, which is not ideal.
Sorry for that quick share. I was just trying to get it up so when you were talking, they could see like what we were discussing. But that's an issue. We are open yesterday to present to backend pretty much of a structure that's been working for us, just to have a conversation around to see if we can create a new endpoint for this, or if I'm trying to take a lot of the load, or I think we should take a lot of the load of the data manipulation as much as possible off the front end and let backend handle that, so we're not, killing performance too much on the front end. Because we're finding ourselves a lot of the times in like double loops, and sometimes maybe even a triple loop, and that's as you know, not the best for performance to get down that nitty gritty.
Yeah, that makes sense. There must be a representation somewhere internally in the backend that knows what the relationship is. So, and that may be useful for folks, even in the API in general, people who are writing different kinds of automation other than us. So, yeah, that's a good idea.
Is that issue linked it's not in the agenda, right? The one that you opened about the data shape?
I did not even know we had an agenda. Dimitri made this. Sorry about that. I linked it in the DAG channel yesterday. Oh, okay, cool. I'll put it in the agenda really quick. Sorry.
No, sorry. I just want to be able to follow up on it afterward, so that I can look at it and have thoughts. Do you guys have a shared project that you're using too for your experiments?
Yeah, we'll share the Linkage Engine. That's a good idea. Right now we have like two branch. There's a master, which is kind of a very basic version, and there was a developed version, which is the one that I worked last week while Peyton was away, which is, I would say, kind of the version I showed with all of the lines and everything. It's still in a very early stage, but any feedback at this point is appreciated, and like the structure. And I was kind of my next step was going through kind of making sure that we can simplify this code as much as possible and have like very testable function, because I feel I'm concerned that I want to make sure that whenever we're ready for work, like officially work on that, we have like very small function that can be tested for outputs, and maybe with the data manipulation being on the backend, it's going to be easier. But even then, we can have like a couple of very simple like rendering tests where it's like, if I give you this coordinate, I expect this a line to exist that has this data. So I'm gonna move on that, and then it would be kind of the scaling and making sure everything can be properly rendered.
It might be worth looking at the visual tests that we have, right? We have screenshot tests for various UI things, so this might be a good candidate for that. Although fortunately, since the SVG is inspectable, you can also check the coordinates.
Yeah. We actually discussed that yesterday. And Sarah, like if you ever wanted to do like a mall pair, I guess, to just kind of go through the code and stuff, just hit us up. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if they announced this yet, but I know it's going to be in the next meeting that I'm moving back to Verify, so I'm going to be working on this with you guys. So,
is that CI or?
Yeah.
Oh, sweet! Awesome.
I'm going to be joining you guys.
Woohoo! Awesome. So basically, we're going to just dump you the project. Is that right?
We're going to all just mob all day on it. It'll be great.
We're going to assign it to Sarah and take a 3-week vacation. No, just kidding.
Awesome. Perfect. So do you have like a timeline in terms of like when you're transitioning?
Pretty much this week. So
oh, awesome.
I'm finishing up some stuff, and yeah, I think it's going to be announced in the CI meeting that's in like an hour. So preview.
Or spoiler, depending on your preference.
Don't tell Cipoletti I told you. Don't take the wind out of his sails.
I'm really good at faking that I'm surprised. It's years of experience at Christmas with my parents, so I'll pretend that I'm surprised and I've never heard about that.
Jason, I wanted to check. I don't know if you're still in the loop on. I mean, I know you're always in the loop because I see you everywhere. But as far as like plans for implementation, I just kind of want to get a little bit of a product overview on like when are we expecting to implement this?
That I don't know. Yeah, I just don't know. Tao is out for the next couple of weeks. She wouldn't have the answer to that. I know I had thought that it was planned for 13.0 was the last I had heard. I'm sure it's not too far away whenever it is. But no, I don't know the exact date that this issue is currently planned for. Is the issue in the agenda? I could take a look at least at that part. Let's see.
Yeah, the design issue that we're working on is in there that we're kind of like.
Well, actually, it's so it is. So if you go to that one, it links to the other one. It is still in 13.0. So if this can be wrapped up and be built in 13.0, then that looks like what Tao is targeting.
Okay, awesome. Does anyone have anything else they would like to ask or share for this meeting?
Do you folks have any like pending or any items that relate to UX? And maybe I can also help have a conversation with Dimitri. Are there any next steps that involve the user experience other than the technical details you already discussed?
We may, I guess we don't have any granular data based on like the actual jobs. Currently in our current data visualization for the current stage-based pipeline, like we have ways to restart jobs, they link to things, they show different details, they show statuses. In the current mockups, they aren't as detailed like that. So we kind of really need like what we actually want to show in the functionality before we implement, because I'm sure we probably just don't want to show just the name of the job. So that'd be great to kind of get that laid out.
I would say also, like, there are 2 points I would like to add on that. Like, the first one is, I know, like, we're gonna look into like having like the curve line, for example, visually. One of the things that I wanted to know is how important is that for the first version? Because I'm gonna spend some time exploring, but I'm still not sure how easy it is to do. It seems a bit complex to do a curve generator. Maybe Sarah can do it in 1 hour, and that my question is not relevant. But if it's not easy to do, then how important is that versus having straight lines? That would be one. And the other one would be, is there any specific usability that we're expecting out of this SVG? Like, I know Dimitri talked about having over effect. I don't think it's the first version kind of thing anyway. But like, like mouse overing a line, and then that's the one that's focused, and you don't see the other as well. Like the opacity goes down. I don't know, like, are there anything like that that's planned? Are we going to try and kind of just list all the thing that we want and make them as optional, or do we just go with the minimal and we don't, we just assume that it's going to be the very simple thing?
I would say I have one design question, although you, Fred and Peyton, might already know this. I noticed that when I look at some of the mockups, the line colors, is there a decision about how the line colors are going to work, like which job they belong to?
I'm saying yes with my head, but like it's more like, yes, that's a good question. I also thought about it earlier, but like I forgot to ask, so that's great.
Same. Yeah, same. I assume it's going to be, I would assume it'd be super difficult to associate a line color with every job, especially if we have like 1,000 jobs. Wouldn't we need like some kind of unique index for different colors based on other jobs that we'd have to link?
So D3 does have a decent color scale possibility. I think they do tend to top out more at like 20, but there's a couple different types of scales that they have. And again, it's like, should lines be darker when they have more jobs depending on them? Should lines that all have the same dependency start off with the same shade and carry that through? Like, that's something I notice when I look at the examples and the designs, is just like how much lifting we want the color to do.
Sounds good.
Just a question: where did Dimitri, in a way, store the design or the guidelines? Because I have access now to this issue linked here, and I'm curious to see, because I saw some design exploration, but I'm also curious, like, is there any design thinking behind like the color, the hierarchy?
We have an original. So Dimitri, during his design exploration, came across a tangled tree visualization on D3's examples, and he's been iterating on that with a little script that I just edited for him to mess around with the data. And as far as I know, the only place that his designs exist right now that I've been able to access are in the issue only.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'll check with him, and I'm also gonna throw all this information on Slack so that he knows that we discussed this. Cool, thank you, folks.
To add on the color issue, I think one thing that's interesting is right now, just for work engineering purposes, it's just a random color generator. So just pick any color; it doesn't matter. But I think one thing that will be important is that every time that I refresh, the color changes, and like obviously for now it doesn't matter. But I'm thinking in terms of like in an official version, I don't think like a user would like that the color are random, for example. Like you'd get confused very quickly. So if we have the same order of color every time, so like for example, every time it's your first line, it's the same color, or if it has the same number of jobs. So like Sarah was saying, so I think that would be more consistent also. So even in terms of like understanding your graph, like every time, it could change a little bit depending on if your graph change, but not like if you have the same graph, it should be the same color kind of deal.
It sounds like maybe we can keep that data persistence with the color scale that Sarah was mentioning with D3. It sounds like we might could explore that and keep that consistency of attaching a color to a line and making it darker depending on how many jobs are connected to it type deal.
Yeah, often with D3, it's associated with the data point, so you can do it by you can do it either by ordering, that it'll apply them by order, or you can give it a different accessor function. So however we decide we want to keep them the same, that's pretty easy to do in D3.
Awesome. Anything else from anyone?